Today's topic is Erikson 8 Stages of Psychosocial Development. Erikson divided psychosocial development in different stages. In that, first one is trust versus mistrust. The trust versus mistrust, it belongs to the age group of 0 to 18 months, that is infant. If the infant need such as attention and affection are properly met, or if he is handled in a reasonably consistent fashion, he forms a global impression of trustworthiness. For example, if the child needs to get milk, at that at that time, if he get milk, or if he get adequate love and care, he get a global impression of trustworthiness. On the other hand, if the child world is inconsistent, painful, stressful, and threatening, he learns to accept this kind of environment and believes that life is unpredictable, not trustworthy. Consequently, the frustrated infant becomes suspicious, fearful, and overly concerned with security. Mistrust means, on the other hand, if the child is not met his needs, the child is not get adequate milk, if the child is not get care, love, so that cause a painful or stressful or threatening situation in the child. So that's why the child feels that the society or the environment is unpredictable or not trustworthy. So this child become suspicious, fearful, and overly concerned with security. So that is trust versus mistrust that occurs in the first stage of development, that is in the infant. Next one, autonomy versus shame and doubt. And this belongs to the age group of 18 months to 3 years. That is, in preschooler age, the autonomy versus shame and doubt. During the during the toddler period, the children's physical development allow them to increase their autonomy and to establish greater contact with the surroundings. It is found that he is exploring feeding, dressing, toileting habits. If his attempt to do things for himself are successful, it leads him to believe that he has a certain amount of control over himself. That is known as autonomy. During the developmental stages of child in preschooler, the child learns to feed self or dress himself or take bath himself or toileting himself, all these things, if he done himself, that creates a feeling of control over himself. That is known as the autonomy. On the other hand, if the child repeatedly fails in trying to master these skills, daily activities, self doubt may grow. One response to self doubt is the practice of abiding compulsively by fixed routines. So, what he is do is he always resistant to do these activities. So that leads to shame and doubt. That is regarding autonomy versus shame and doubt. It belongs to the age group of toddler. Next psychosocial stage of development is initiative versus guilt. Initiative versus guilt, that belongs to the age group of 3 to 5 years, preschooler. Here, if the child get parental support and encouragement for the initiativeness of making challenges, or uh, if the child get adequate support or encouragement for his initiativeness, it can leads to a sense of joy in exercising initiative and taking on new challenges. If his initiatives are generally effective, and if he learns constructive ways of dealing with things and people, his sense of initiative will be strengthened. So, initiative means during the preschooler age, the child will be developed to making plans or conquering a new challenges in his life. So if he done something and the child is getting adequate support and encouragement from the families, that will help the child to develop a feeling of initiativeness, or his initiative character will be strengthened. On the other hand, if the child is unable to acquire a sense of initiative, strong feelings of guilt, unworthiness, and resentments may persist. The guilt means sometimes when the child is starts to do something new, sometimes it may fail, and that time the parents may scold them. The parents will not support that child, so that feeling may leads to guilty to the child, and that leads to unworthiness. So that is regarding the initiative versus guilt. Next one, industry versus inferiority. Industry versus inferiority belongs to the 5 to 13 years of age group, that is schooler. During this age, the children must learn skills needed for full functioning of adults, including personal care, productive work, and independent social living. If the children are stifled in their efforts to become a part of the adulthood, they may conclude that they are inadequate or inferior and lose faith in their power to become industrious. So, industry versus inferiority means here the industry means here the school age group children, they must learn some skills to develop themselves, like personal care or productive work or creativity. All these types of independent social living they may exhibit. So if they successful in that, that indicates the a self of industry. But if the child is not able to do these things, if the child is not at all productive, if the child is not doing any personal care, if the child is not at all independent, always dependent mother for filling his needs, so that indicates inferiority of the child. So he loses faith in his ability. So that child will develop an inferior the feeling of inferiority. So he will not initiate things properly. So that is known as industry versus inferiority. Next psychosocial stage of development is identity versus role confusion. Identity versus role confusion, that belongs to the age group of 13 to 21 years, that is teenager. With the onset of puberty, childhood ends and the responsibility of adulthood starts. In Erikson view, the identity is achieved by integrating a number of roles: student, sister, or brother, friend, and so on, into a coherent pattern, providing a sense of inner continuity or identity. If the child fails to integrate central identity or cannot resolve a major conflict between two major roles with opposing value system, it may lead to confusion and despair. So, the identity versus role confusion means, essence of identity means the group adulthood, they starts to understand what is the role of them, what is the role of themselves. For example, during the age of development or during the puberty time, the child will acquire a role of student, a role of sister, a role of friend, and so on. There are different characters, different roles will be lead by that child itself. So if the child is understand these all are the roles of these all are the roles of himself, so that means it's a sense of identity. But sometimes the group or the child, they are not understand what is their role. They are student or they are sister or they are friend. So there will be a confusion. Okay, so they will not accept their role changes or their role identity. They are not accept. So that time or these two major role, that may provide a confusion in their belief. So that is the role identity versus role confusion. Next one is intimacy versus isolation. Intimacy versus isolation that occurs in 21 to 39 years of age, that is in young adulthood. In intimacy means it is an ability to share oneself with another person of opposite sex without fear of losing the other's identity. So in this time, there will be a marital relationship. So uh, they will believe themselves and they will share their love to the other person or the person opposite sex. So that is the essence of intimacy. Isolation means a person is failure in establishing an intimate relationship with the opposite sex. That will be a painful feelings to that person and they will become lonely. So that is the intimacy versus isolation. So this intimacy versus isolation, that is in the young adulthood, that occurs after the marital or the during the marital relation. So during this time we share our feelings to the of our partner, right? So if they develop a sense of intimacy, that means they are good, they are maintaining that relationship. But if they fail, that means there may be chance for divorce or they will be isolated or they may be live lonely. So that is the intimacy versus isolation. Next one, generativity versus stagnation. That is in the age group of 40 to 65 years. That is in the middle age or middle adulthood. So here the main challenge here is to remain productive and creative in all aspects of one's life. People who have successfully negotiated the six earlier stages are likely to find meaning and joy in all the activities of life, career, family, society. On the other hand, if the a person failure to resolve all this conflict in earlier times often results in preoccupation with one's own health, psychological needs, or comfort. So, that is known as generativity versus stagnation. So, if the person they are successful in the previous all conflicts, the person will develop a generativity because his life will be successful in his career, family, and society. So, that is known as generativity. But in or on the other hand, if the person is not at all able to successful, or no, if the person is failure to resolve this conflict, that may leads to a preoccupation with one's own health or psychological needs. He will not be a productive. So that is known as stagnation. Next and last stage is integrity versus despair. It is occurs 65 years onwards, that is older adulthood. In the last stage of life, it is normal for the individual to look back over his life and make judgment. If one looks back over one's life and find satisfaction and that it has had meaning and involvement, that is known as a sense of integrity. But one's life seemed to have been a series of misdirected energy and lost chances, that will have the feeling of sense of despair. So that is integrity versus despair. So in the later stage, we will think backly, and what we are doing is we make a judgment how we have how we spend our life. So if he get satisfaction, that means a sense of integrity. But if the person think about his own life, he is not develop a satisfaction, or he thinking about the lost chances, that will get a feeling of sense of despair. So in conclusion, infancy, that is trust versus mistrust. In early childhood, that is autonomy versus shame and doubt. In preschool, initiative versus guilt. In school age, industry versus inferiority. In adolescence, identity versus role confusion. In young adulthood, intimacy versus isolation. In middle adulthood, generativity versus stagnation. In maturity, or in the older adult, ego, integrity versus despair. So these all are the stages of psychosocial development. Thank you.